So we'll go ahead and jump right in. So really what this TED Talk's about is how do you, our theme is be the authentic you, right? And when we kind of present ourselves, we present our best selves. So if you think about just from social media, Facebook, anything, you show the highlights of your life. And that's really kind of what you want your friends to see. You want them to be a little bit envious about, oh, look at all the things that I've done. But that works really well on a very low level of understanding somebody. When you're trying to really establish a good mentorship or a good bond and relationship, we actually bond in some of our lowlights, right? Some of the things that didn't go so well, and how did we handle it, and how did that other person approach us and help us handle it. And so I really want to kind of jump into that. So start off with, right, if I were to give my bio, this is what I submitted with the PSALN bio. My 5 rocks have to do with, essentially I'm a global technology owner for the FPM bowls, or discrete feed systems. So I'm working on vibratory bowls, I'm working on what we call the good unload, things like that you'll see during the tour. And then I'm also going to lead the training and development of EWP throughout the Gillette P&E community, right? So, we'll go through our big rocks, we'll go through our work biography, the fact that I've worked at Seedle, that I've worked at Baby Care, that I've worked at Gillette. You'll go through your technical expertise and you'll say, hey, I really can get design requirements and executions hammered in, and I can get things turned around in this time. And you kind of give all these things. And then you might get down to your education. So, in my case, I went to Rose-Hulman. I got a BS. I'll say that my, personal biography, I might say a very little snippet about my family. So, my heritage is from the Virgin Islands, and I grew up in a family of 6 with 3 older brothers. Might give a small snippet on my hobbies of hiking and things like that, right? And so you go through this, and the person knows the part of you that you're willing to share with them, right? And everybody understands that, okay, well, you sound like a really cool person. You sound, like something ideal. They assume that you're happy. They assume that things are going well. There's a lot of things that you leave out, right? The lowlights. So for me, during the 2013 to 2015 span, actually really 2014 to 2015, I had 3 deaths in my family within 6 months, right? And so that greatly impacted how I showed up at work and greatly impacted what was on my mind throughout that time period, right? I also have, so I say a family of 6, but really there's only 4 of us remaining, just my older brothers and myself, right? And so it's like, all right, now there's this level of, oh, I understand where you're coming from. So, if we talk about where am I going back for a holiday, it's not going to be going back to see my parents because they're not there, right? And that establishes another level of trust that people can have with you. The other thing to note is, right, between 2015 and 2016 when I was at Baby Care, so people are like, well, that's a short segment of time to be at a place. And for me, it was one of the most difficult years of my life, right? So I had a transition, and I was ramping up, but the issue wasn't the transition. The issue was the work culture and environment and how that changed so drastically between where I started at Seedle and where I found my comfort and the work environment in Baby Care. And so understanding that, right, looking and parsing through my past of, all right, what was it that made it challenging? What was it that I want to make sure that I don't repeat can help me move forward and move forward wiser, right? It can also help me talk with my boss more authentically of this is the type of role that I want. This is the type of thing that really stresses me out. And then on top of that, right, during my move, and one of the things that helped garner my move, helped me make this decision, was that I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. So it was like actually for mental health, for physical health, it's actually better for me to be in a different environment here where I'm closer to my brother, closer to family, things like that, right? So there's all these levels of things that like, hey, I never actually told you on my bio. I wouldn't tell anybody, but maybe I should tell my mentor. Maybe I should tell, if I have a good relationship with my manager, maybe I should tell him. You know, maybe even if you're one up, if you're really, really close and you want to make sure that they're choosing the right roles for you, you got to tell them some things to know, like, hey, these are my restrictions. I don't want to travel. If you have a mother or parent or whatever, somebody who's sick, I don't want to travel so much because for me, it's critical that I be here. Or maybe you do want to travel. Hey, actually, I'm not going to get married until probably X. I've talked it over with my spouse. We're both ready to travel. I want to put that out there, right? So that's what you're using like my career and things like that for, is to say, this is what's going on in my personal life, and I want you to be aware of that so that when you're looking at roles, keep me in mind for this, but maybe pass it up on this, right? So when we think about things that your mentor should know, they should understand your frustration point. So, right, for me, I know that like not having a clear role really stresses me out, and it's one of those things that I've actually learned in, including in this Gillette role that I came into, of like, hey, you know what, I don't really see the clear line between what I'm supposed to do and what they're supposed to do. And so here is my draft plan of what I say I want to deliver. And I talked with this person and they said they're okay with delivering that. So can we agree that this is what the work plan split is going to be? Sometimes you have to drive it, right? So I've learned very much so that you can say, I just don't want clarity, but sometimes your manager wants you to come back and say, this is the role that I want to do. This is how I divided it. This is how all the other work is going to get done. I've aligned it with this person. Are you in agreement? And you can get a very good kind of response because you're taking initiative in that case. Or for me, navigating energy-intensive personality. So we all have to do that. It is always going to be probably a frustration point for most of us. And it's one of those things that you just have to be aware of, all right, so if you put me in this role with somebody who takes a lot of energy, can we make sure that maybe my other frustration points aren't being met at the same time, right? So we all can take a certain amount of stress. We just don't want all of our stress factors at the same time. And then also being kind of micromanaged by people, especially when they're not necessarily leadership for me. So when peers feel the need to micromanage me, it makes me feel like, how are we going to have a team where we can all work together and get this done? Because if you're micromanaging me, are you actually doing your work? That's kind of the way to get it. So for me, it's like very clear that we make sure that like, let's try not to hit all my frustration points at once, right? And if not, if we are hitting them, let's drive for clarity and drive to remove those frustration points. Other things, though, that especially with mentors, I'd say is key, is understanding your signs of stress. And I think that for most people, that's actually hard to even know. So you've got to be very introspective of like, when I've been on that cusp of a breakdown, or when I've broken down, depending on which one you've hit, like, what all was contributing to that? Or what was my demeanor? What was my cry of help? So I think everybody has a sign that's a cry for help. Because we're not all going to come and say, oh my goodness, I'm about done. Sometimes you want somebody to read just so that you know that they care enough about you that they're going to do something to help you. But if they don't know what your signs of stress are, like they could love you to the moon and back, but they don't know to step in and to intercede. So for me, there is not smiling in normal interaction. So I would say I smile a lot, and a lot of people kind of notice that. And the more stressed I am, the less likely I am to say hi with a smile. If it's kind of more of a smirk or nothing at all. And so when you notice that, right, that's one of those, hey, I haven't seen you smile in like a week. Is everything okay? And it's one of those kind of trigger points of, oh, actually, if it's in a quiet environment, right? So not everybody will, in the middle of the hall, have a deep down discussion, but maybe it's like, hey, let me pull you in 5 minutes. Let's just chat, make sure everything's okay. On the flip side, these are more funny, but a little, like when I'm really stressed out, I will dream about work. And so I will normally share those dreams because I find them partially funny. And they normally are nonsensical. So I've actually approached somebody about an email that he sent that was in my dream. Very detailed dream of which he had a stance and opinion that I agreed with for a different reason, but I just wanted him to know, hey, we're going this way, so just about the email you sent, and he was like, what email? Oh yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing is like, if you realize I'm venting way too much, so it's like every single day, Jasmine, you seem to be venting about the same thing. Are you okay? And fixating on an issue. It's one of those things that I've realized. All right, I do that a lot, and actually from what Teresa taught us about personality types, that's within my personality type. That's how I deal with stress, and that's exactly, like always talking about this issue because I don't know how to solve it, and I'm looking for somebody who can open up my perspective, right? So what does this really mean? So what we really need to do is, you're not going to tell your entire story to everybody. That's way too vulnerable. You don't know if the trust is there. You don't know how they'll react. You don't know if they have your back or if they're going to try to exploit your vulnerability. But there are some key people, some key relationships that really benefit from it. And so if you think, like, how does my story help others? Well, number one, telling it in this type of environment, right, everybody's going to go through hardships. And when you share that with people that you care about, it helps them know that they're not alone, right? So we've all been there, we've all gone through, right? I'm 6 years with the company. You come in at band 1 and you think, all right, I'm going to conquer everything. I'm going to be the best person ever. And oh my goodness, I'm going to just like skyrocket to CEO. And then you hit your first hurdle and you stumble and you think, oh, nothing's going to happen. What was I thinking? Like, I'm going to be better than everybody else? We've all had hurdles. We've all had hurdles both in work and in personal life. And so when we talk about, hey, these are my failures, but look where I am. Look at how people perceive me. Look at what I'm doing. All of a sudden it makes it real, where when you have your failure, it's not crushing, right? So we want to make sure part of bringing other people up is showing our vulnerability so that they know we're all human. We're not, we didn't get here because we're better or worse than another person. It's because of how we got up from that trial, how we got up from that failure that brought us to where we are. And then you have your managers, your mentors, or maybe even close coworkers. Maybe you have peer mentors or something like that. They can look out for your signs of stress. They can tell you, hey, you look like maybe you need to slow down, or maybe you need to talk to your manager, or maybe you need to do this. So that somebody's looking out for you when you're in the grind, because it's really easy to not realize that you're approaching that wall. Because you're watching, when you get very stressed, you're just watching every single step that you take. And you have no idea what's going on around you, and that you're about to fall off a cliff. And so maybe somebody can intercede and step up and say, hey, maybe you need to take a break, maybe you need to, recharge, or, what can I do to help? So then, thinking about kind of what pushes you through those tough times. So I'll say last year, as I said, was a really rough year for me. And so for me, it was finding the right mentor that I could vent with. And so thankfully I had moved recently, and I had a boss who was still checking in with me. And that whole venting thing, right? We came and he was probably like 2 levels above me, and he was like, "How's the new job?" And I was like, "Well, it's good, and this, and this," and then it slowly like slipped into a venting session, and I didn't mean it to. But he heard that cry, and he was like, "You know what? It's a new role. Come back to me in 3 months, and I want an update. I want to know how things are going." So I came back to him in 3 months, and it was still a venting issue. I was still having, it was a slightly different problem. It had migrated from what it was before to something that actually ended up being worse for me. And so he had that ear of, oh, okay, this is going on. Let me keep her in the back of my mind. And he started telling me like, hey, you know, we're going to see if roles open up and you can come back. We're going to see what we can do. So it ended up being that he reached out to me and was like, hey, I have a role that's going to open up. Do you want to come back? Well, at that point in time, it had gotten bad enough, and I had not reached out soon enough to other people that I was actually on disability. I was out for mental illness. I had an anxiety attack at work. And I was like, actually, I'm not even working right now. And he called me immediately and was like, all right, let's put together a game plan. These are your 3 options. I'm going to go figure out. We'll come back because we don't want to lose you, right? So that's really key, right? So because I delivered and because I was an asset to P&G, they make sure, hey, what can we do to make sure that you're still here in a year, in 2 years? And just being open and honest. Sometimes you got to just say, like, man, it sucks to like give you the like tears of my life, but maybe if you understand that, now you care about me as a person, and you're going to do all that you can do to make sure that you have my back, right? At the end of the day, we're human, and we need that emotional connection before we go break our backs for another person. So if you're not willing to be open and honest, then they're not willing to break their back for you. So how do you ask for help, and when do you ask for it? I think one of the key things is like the when do you ask for it, right? So you've got to have self-awareness. This is why you need to know yourself. You need to know what's normal, what's borderline, and what's high, right? Normal, you shouldn't be where you can't function without any amount of stress. Life is going to be stressful. If you are sensing that little small things are way too stressful, right? That's when you should be talking to kind of therapists, or you should be talking to the people, the counselors at work, and just saying, I don't know if I'm managing this well, or I don't know how this is, and they keep things confidential. So you can kind of figure out, is there just the way that you're looking at life, or the way that you're hardwired, or your mind's hardwired, that you overreact to things, right? But once you establish what your normal is, then you should know what borderline is. Like, all right, I've got 2 out of my 3 stress factors. I am thinking about this all the time. I can't shut off my mind. I'm replaying conversations, or I'm replaying mistakes, and I'm approaching that. That's when you call for help. Because if you wait until you're high, until you're just about to break, or have broken, it's too late. And help takes a long time to come in, right? It takes a while for a role to open up. It takes a while for things. So you've got to have that awareness at borderline that, hey, I need help, right? So from the first time that I engaged with that mentor to when I got here, it was a year, right? He was like, all right, we need to get through this year so that it's not such a quick transition, and we'll see what we can do, right? You work on delivering your objectives. I'll work on finding you a role, right? So it can take about a year to move. So you want to know where borderline is. And you want to keep touching base. Actually, it went from borderline, we're back to normal. I did these action items in between. We're good. Or it's still borderline, it's still creeping. I need help, right? And then The last thing is, how do you take the action? Well, so some of it is personal approach. You really do. So for instance, I didn't have the clarity that I wanted, and essentially I went to my manager and I said, look, there's too much work for me to do. I'm becoming the bottleneck. So between me and these other two people, we're going to split it up like this, this, and this. And I will make sure that I get this run through these designers. They'll run through with those designers. We'll touch base. We'll make sure everything is working. But this is how I'm going to approach the work, because I didn't have clarity before on how I was going to do it. So I decided this is, look, I'm going to draw myself a box because that's what I need. You don't seem like the type of person who wants to prescribe a box, so I'll do it myself. And then sometimes it's working with your manager. So right, your manager is your first line of defense, right? It's the person that you see most often. The key is to try and work with your manager as much as possible, right? But we all know that people leave a lot because of their manager. So if you realize that your manager is not the right person, figure out who your mentor is. Figure out if you have a relationship with your one-up that you can talk to, and make sure that you drive alignment that way, right? But look for those external people that you can go to, right? And hopefully what we're hoping to do during the mentor speed dating is that you start to find networks of people that you actually click with, right? So rather than just being assigned to a mentor, like have a conversation with your mentor and be like, you know what, I like you. I really, really hope that this works out, right? And then also outside help. So sometimes things are bigger than what can get solved at work. Sometimes you need a therapist. Sometimes you need your spouse to be your listening board, your advocate. Sometimes you need a brother, a sister, a mother, or whatever, right? So use that outside help, you know, as much as possible. And so that was essentially, I want to actually stop there and go, if anybody has questions, comments, concerns, thoughts. You know, I wanted to be vulnerable with you so that you guys, so that we can create an atmosphere in here, right, behind these closed doors, where we together can be vulnerable so that if somebody is going through something right now, if somebody has a cry for help, you don't have to say it in front of the big group, but I want you to know that the people here have your back, right? So even if it's, I pull somebody aside, I pull Rhea aside, and I talk to her for a bit, like, hey, this is what I'm going through. I want us to be able to have that discussion here.